Ukraine accepts this proposal. We consider it positive. We are ready to take such a step, and the United States of America must convince Russia to do the same.
Ukraine agrees to a proposed US-brokered ceasefire deal. How will Russia respond? Hello, I'm Anton, and this is The Heat. On Tuesday, Ukraine agreed to a US-brokered 30-day ceasefire proposal during peace talks in Saudi Arabia. It is a first step by Ukraine toward ending its conflict with Russia. US President Donald Trump spoke about the development on Wednesday.
We had a great success yesterday. We have a full ceasefire if it kicks in. We have to see. It's up to Russia now. But we've had a good relationship with both parties, actually. And we'll see. We'll be knowing people are going to Russia right now as we speak. And hopefully we can get a ceasefire from Russia.
The United States Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to travel to Russia this week as Moscow awaits talks with American counterparts before weighing in on the deal. To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Moscow, Dmitry Babich is a journalist and Russian political analyst. Here in Washington, D.C., Anton Fedyashin is a professor of history at American University. From Brussels, we're joined by Pieter Cleppe. He is the editor-in-chief of BrusselsReport.eu. And from Kiev, Oleksii Riabchyn is an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Oleksii, you know, this all started out a few weeks ago when we saw that very heated debate in the Oval Office at the White House. But now the talks that have taken place, negotiations have been taking place. President Zelensky has agreed to that ceasefire. It is a limited ceasefire. It is confined to operations on the sea, in the sky, and the Ukrainians also want Russia to return those children that were taken to Russia during the conflict. But Ukraine did not get a security guarantee. There's a different definition of a security guarantee between the Ukrainians and President Trump. So where does it go to from here?
Hi, Arnold. Indeed, we received a proposal from an American side, not only to do the ceasefire on the sea and on the air, but also to do a ceasefire for 30 days to show a goodwill, and we accepted it. And looking forward, the ball is on the Russian side. Honestly, I'm skeptical that Russia will accept this ceasefire. I bet that they will start putting on additional conditions. And we might see a really tough reaction from the American administration, as you already mentioned, and we witnessed this in an Oval Office, and later on the intelligence and the defensive support has been on pause. But after this successful conversation in Jeddah, the support has been resumed. So let's see the development. And from what I already understand from the American counterparts, if Russia will not agree to this, the tough package on sanctions on Russian economy that is not doing really great, and we know for sure that they have lots of problems with this, might be the next to target by the US administration. So let's see the development.
Okay, let's go to Moscow, get the view from there. Dmitry Babich is there. Dmitry, we await now a response from Russia, but that has been complicated in the past few days by that major drone attack on Moscow. The Russian Foreign Ministry had a post on X, previously known as Twitter, and that post said, and I'm going to quote it here, it said, "The Kyiv junta once again made its terrorist nature clear by attacking Russian regions with a barrage of UAVs." That's the official technical term for drones. The Zelensky regime clearly showed a lack of political will for achieving peace and negotiated settlement of the conflict. But I should also add, Dmitry, that this attack in Moscow, outside Moscow, followed a Russian major attack on Ukrainian positions a few days earlier. So, what are expectations from Russia?
The Russian attack against against Ukrainian line followed another Ukrainian attack against many targets in Russia, and the initial Russian strike against Ukrainian energy object followed the Ukrainian attack against the bridge connecting Crimea to the rest of Russia in 2022. So it's very difficult to find out who struck first in this situation. Let's not try to present one side as angel and the other side as devils. That's absolutely fruitless. I think this is good news that actually it is possible for Ukraine to agree to some sort of ceasefire. But obviously there are many things that are still unclear after these 9 hours of negotiations in Jeddah. We still don't know who is going to guarantee this truce if indeed it takes place. Yeah. We heard European powers. They said they were ready to step in, but they are not neutral bystanders. They cannot be intermediaries because they have been on the side of Kiev since the beginning of hostilities, since the beginning of the Ukrainian civil war in 2014. Even before that, they were active in ousting the legally elected President Yanukovych. So I think we are still in the very beginning of the road. What will be the terms of the ceasefire? Where the border is going to be located, which force, which soldiers will be dividing the two sides. So Russia is still waiting for the answers to these questions. Right now, what is being done is the Ukrainian penetration of the Russian territory in Kursk is being liquidated. According to the official reports today, 86% of the territory occupied by Ukraine in August last year, 86% has been taken back right now by Russian forces.
Yeah, just one point.
Negotiate until we take all of that territory back.
Yeah, just one point, Dmitry. I mean, the American envoy is going to be having talks in Russia, probably answer some of those questions that you posed. But you did say this is good news. So could we expect a positive response from Russia, albeit with some conditions attached?
I would not exclude that the response from Russia would be at least partially positive. Of course, there are different forces in Russia. There are many hawks. We have our own hawks who say we should not pay attention. We should continue until the victories end. But if you listen to the response from Dmitry Peskov, the official spokesman of the Kremlin, he did not reject that proposal out of hand. He basically sounded positive about it. He said that everything needs to be seen and calculated and developed, but he did not reject it out of hand. In the same way, let me remind you that in Istanbul in 2022, when we were very close to cessation of hostilities, as we now know from our foreign minister, the text was actually prepared by Ukrainians. It came from the Ukrainian side of Istanbul. In the same way here, at least we have one major Western power, the United States, supporting a peaceful settlement. That's a very different attitude from what we had during these 3 years, which was constantly Russia must lose, Ukraine must win. And the diabolization of just one of the sides, demonization of Russia with the angelization of Ukraine.
All right, let me bring Anton Fedyashin into this conversation. Anton, as Dmitry said, there are hawks in Russia. There are hardliners there as well. In fact, we heard from one. The Russian Senator Konstantin Kosachev said in a Telegram post, and I'm quoting him here, he said, any agreement should be on our terms, not American terms. Is this going to be a hard sell in Moscow?
Well, it's not going to be an easy sell in Moscow, Anand, but listen, I think it's important to remember that we don't know any of the details of what was actually discussed at Jeddah. And the Americans and the Ukrainians have actually done a fairly smart thing in conducting diplomacy behind closed doors and discreetly, unlike what we saw President Zelensky try to do in the Oval Office in front of the American media. So everything depends on the details. Now that we're slowly moving towards diplomacy, I doubt that the Russians will accept whatever proposal Witkoff will bring to Moscow, hook, line, and sinker. Neither the Americans nor the Ukrainians, unfortunately for Ukraine, are in a position to impose conditions on the Russians. But the Russians will probably come back with counter proposals, and that's how this will unfold. Ultimately, what the Russians have said consistently over the past several months is that they are looking for a long-term sustainable peace, and that means full negotiations. And so I think that's what they're going to be pushing this towards.
Anton, this is a nascent effort. It is the start of the process. But I'm wondering, what is your view on, the broad contours of what they're trying to achieve here? A 30-day ceasefire, which could develop into something else. What do you make of that effort?
I think if the focus remains on nothing but the ceasefire, I don't think this is going to work out. It is going to have to be linked to negotiations. There seems to be this obsession in the Trump administration with having a ceasefire first and then negotiations, as if they cannot, war and negotiations can't happen simultaneously. This is no one's preference, but look, we've had plenty of examples of this taking place. The Trump administration was negotiating with the Taliban while the war was going on in Afghanistan. The Americans were negotiating with the Vietnamese during the war. And by the way, North and South Korea were negotiating with each other during the Korean War. So the question is the ceasefire going to be immediately accompanied by the opening of peace talks, in which case I think the Russians may agree to it, or is this simply an end in itself? And the Russians have already said that if this is going to be a temporary ceasefire that slows down their progress across the entire front and simply is used to rearm the Ukrainians to restart clashes again a little bit later, they're not going to go for that. So I think we wait for the next 24 to 48 hours to see what comes out of Moscow.
Pieter Cleppe, European leaders have largely welcomed this ceasefire deal. In fact, several very senior European leaders met with the Ukrainian delegation, and afterwards the Ukrainian delegations reiterated that Europe will be involved in the peace process. It will be a part of this effort. So what does Europe bring to this?
Well, Europe has not had great influence so far. But actually, despite that, it is likely to deliver peace troops, maybe not right away. It's possible that Russia will simply not go along just yet with this Trump plan. But at some point in the future, some kind of ceasefire will need to be agreed. And you can't have a ceasefire without peacekeepers. And of course, then it's very likely that Russia will have to concede that there will be peacekeepers from NATO countries. I think the idea that Ukraine will turn into some demilitarized Switzerland, maybe in the future there was a window of opportunity for that. But I mean, Russia has brought it on itself by invading Ukraine that this is no longer an option. Now, does that mean that we will see the plan approved relatively quickly? I would hope so, but it's anyone's guess, really. It all depends on the Kremlin. I mean, this was the big question all along. All the talk about Europe influencing the process, that was all nonsense, giving Europe's weak defenses. All the talk about Ukraine having a say, that was equally nonsensical, given the fact that Ukraine is completely dependent militarily on American intelligence. That's what we've seen in the last few days. So this is the moment. This is what we've all been waiting for months. What will Putin do? And you know, Trump has not only been threatening with the stick, more sanctions, allow Ukraine to strike deeper into Russian territory, but there's also the carrot. There's been leaks about reactivating Nord Stream 2, for example.
Yeah. Oleksii, you know, there's some very important and relevant questions which have been raised by both Pieter Cleppe and Dmitry Babich, and that is, you know, you have a ceasefire proposal, which is on the table. We, of course, don't know what the Russian response is yet. We probably will know something in the next few days. But the important question is, who polices that ceasefire?
Look, this is like a very important issue to discuss, but like if you will consider all of the options, you will see that like we will definitely opt for the European peacekeeping missions. I don't know, like United Nations peacekeeping. There are not a lot of options, and there are a lot of talks already going on with Macron, with Stallmer, with Merz, and with a lot of leaders who either like promised to send their troops, or like there are a lot of initiatives to close the sky partially. There are a lot of the conversations that will be on the table, and I bet like as the country with the European Union aspiration, which is already a candidate country doing a lot to join the EU as soon as possible, which is also a part of a peace plan. Like we will opt for the European peacekeeping mission, but I can assure one stuff. Like in Ukraine, like we are now producing a lot of weapons. Like our drones are the best in the world, and the cost per kill are the cheapest one. Like there is no technology that possess like in the world that like we are now having. So like to demilitarize us, or to like disarm us, there will be no go. And like we are a democracy, and the president is decided as the chief commander.
Right.
But like if the soldiers will not accept it, if the population will not accept the condition of this peace, like it won't go. It won't fly.
One other point, Oleksii, and that is, I said earlier on that Ukraine was seeking some kind of security guarantee from the United States. But Ukraine's definition of a security guarantee and President Trump's is very different. President Trump thinks that by signing that minerals deal, and that probably is going to happen in the next few days, that is a security guarantee, because once American corporations and mining companies start exploiting those minerals in Ukraine, then the Russians will be very hesitant to attack Ukraine. What is Ukraine's view on that?
I would say, like, we would love to sign this critical mineral deal, and I really regret that it hasn't been signed like 2 weeks ago, like with the incident in our office. Like, we need this deal, like, and we need American investment, European investment, like Chinese investment. We need investment to dig into these critical mineral deals, and we need, it will be definitely a really strong guarantees. Like, for example, one of the biggest gas deposit in Ukraine is in the Black Sea, near the very famous Snake Island, when we sunk the Russian Moskva battleship. And like, it's like a huge bulk of a gas that like we need to explore, like, for example, together with American companies, but without the NATO ships from the US, from Romania, like from Turkey, like wherever, like patrolling this investment, it won't be no go. And like this gas deposit could definitely substitute the Russian gas to Europe. There is no need to relaunch Nord Stream, and I don't believe in this, like with the American LNG coming to Europe. Like we will definitely need this, and I strongly believe in this and another type of security guarantees.
Yeah, Dmitry Babich, we're focusing right now on these negotiations, on this proposed ceasefire, but I'm wondering if that might be a little bit of a narrow focus, because it would seem that President Trump's ultimate goal goes far beyond Ukraine. He wants a better and a far more expansive relationship with Russia, diplomatically as well as economically. There was a Wall Street Journal op-ed piece in which the writer said, Mr. Trump believes that improved relations with Russia are necessary for the American revival, which he hopes to lead. Is that also Russia's hope, that there would be a far bigger, maybe some kind of grand bargain here?
Well, let's not jump to conclusions, and let's not replace one extreme by another. There is not going to be a lot of cooperation between Russia and Western powers, including the United States, in the near future. Mr. Trump's attitude is mercantilist. And I think the global South is watching now what's going on, and what's going on is very bad for the West, for its image. Because if you look deeply into what's going on, you see that Europe, which always positioned itself as some kind of a pacifist new empire, now appears to be the only power that has been pushing for war, despite Mr. Trump's efforts to end the war. And Mr. Trump looks like a very greedy, I would say, stingy man who just wants the resources of Ukraine without any definite guarantees from his side. I mean, what kind of rhetoric is that? Just give us your resources and then you will be protected, because your resources will be ours. That's very much like racket. So it's very interesting how the Western media, while demonizing Trump personally, still follows the same inertia, presenting the United States as some sort of a force for good. So I think Global South is watching very closely and making its conclusions. Russia's cooperation in the next few decades will be with the Global South much more than with the United States, and definitely more than with the European Union.
All right. Anton, Fedyashin, you know, since President Trump took office, the level of anxiety and nervousness in European capitals has definitely risen. We just had 30 defense chiefs meet in Paris to discuss Ukraine's security. The United States was not there. This is what the Dutch Defense Minister, Ruben Brekelmans, this is what he had to say. Let's watch.
The United States has made it clear that its support for Ukraine is no longer a given. And Europe's decades-long reliance on the US cannot simply be taken for granted anymore. Instead, it must be earned. Europe, therefore, needs to fortify its security architecture. And we don't have much time to get this right.
So, Anton, what are we to make of that, and how big a change is this? I mean, we heard the minister there refer to European security architecture. I mean, that architecture has been in place since the end of World War II.
Yes, it has, but it has depended entirely on the United States, which is why when Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote his famous book called The Grand Chessboard in 1997, he unabashedly referred to America's NATO allies as vassals. Now, those are harsh words, but they do reflect the kernel of truth, which is what that the Europeans have preferred to have the Americans pay for and essentially take care of their security over the past 80 years. And they also at the same time relied on reliable and relatively cheap Soviet and then Russian gas deliveries in order to power their economies. And this is why Europe understandably has the highest living standards on the planet today. But they were purchased with the help of American expenditures for security and Soviet and then Russian gas and energy supplies. These days, the United States is turning away from Europe. And this is a process, by the way, that was not initiated by Donald Trump. It was the Obama administration that started its pivot towards Asia. And at the same time, the Europeans have cut themselves off from Russian pipeline gas, although they're buying increasing amounts of LNG, except they're paying multiple times more money for it. And so the conundrum that all of the European governments will face in the coming years and decades, if they actually decide to implement these increases in defense spending, is where are they going to get the money? Because the economies of Europe are slowing down. Most importantly, of course, the German economy. So we'll see what Merz's government does, but this is going to be a long-term and very difficult process. But it's about time and multiple decades too late.
Pieter, Cleppe, Anton Fedyashin raises an important question there, a key question, and that is, where is Europe going to get the money to go on its own? In fact, on Wednesday, defense ministers from the UK, France, Germany, Italy and Poland, they also met in Paris. They promised to increase defense spending and provide security guarantees for Ukraine. We talked about those security guarantees. We don't know whether that's possible because Russia has already said that's a non-starter. But on defense spending, can they do it?
Oh yeah, they are absolutely able to do it. Whether they will do it is another question. They are saying they will do it at the moment. But then, you know, if you take, for example, the budget of the EU, about 1/3 is climate spending of all sorts. Yeah. So this would, of course, be, I mean, a perfect area where the EU could save some money. They could engage more on nuclear power instead of, you know, spending a lot of money on all kinds of central planning programs. Same with agricultural subsidies, regional subsidies. So even if you only look in the EU budget, you find lots of money. If you look at the national budget, you find many opportunities to save. But European governments are not willing to do that. They don't want to cut spending. They want to let the grandchildren pay the bill. They want to go into debt, even joint European debt. So I think that's quite concerning. It also shows that perhaps they're not as serious as they claim they are.
Yeah. Oleksii, we have this 30-day ceasefire proposal right now, and we're waiting the response from Russia. But there is no deadline on when Russia should respond. Russia hasn't been given just a certain number of weeks or days to respond. How great is the risk that, you know, the fighting could continue? It could continue for months more.
You know, like we Ukrainians felt the speed of a new administration in the US with their decision-making process. And I would say this is like one of the main differences with the previous administration when, like, during the Biden's, I don't know, like F-16, like it took like a couple of years for us to receive an approval with a lot of efforts. Here, the decision-making process, like 5 minutes, like, and decision is there, like, or like it relies. So like the speed is there, and I am not in a position to advise to any Russian, and I don't want to do this, but
yeah,
like, we will see definitely that like they will be pushing and pushing for
right.
the fast solutions. And to the European Union, I guess, like Ukraine will solve a lot of the problem.
Right.
Not if, but like when Americans will withdraw their troops, it will be Ukrainian who will substitute it.
Okay.
Like we can produce a lot of cheap weapons. We can do a lot of agriculture. We have a second biggest deposit
Right.
of gas. And like we will definitely help Ukraine to do the economic growth.
Okay, I want to get I want to get to Dmitry very quickly. Dmitry, I've got less than 30 seconds left, but President Trump says he hopes to talk with President Putin next week. What do we expect out of that?
I think we should expect some progress. Any kind of contact is better than absence of contact. And please remember, the main complaint of Russia was that the United States and the EU cut all ties to Russia. It was not Russia who did it initially.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anton in Washington.